You wander because your mind is untrained. You chase ease because your spirit lacks structure. I did not become invincible by chasing pleasure. I studied the way. I lived by the sword, not for violence, but for clarity. The samurai code is not about war. It is about living without fear, moving with purpose, speaking only when needed. In this lesson, I will show you the path I walked, how to sharpen your spirit, discipline your will, and act with quiet power. Subscribe to our channel. If you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Listen to me carefully. I did not seek comfort. I sought the way. You must train your mind as you would your blade, daily, without excuse. Every morning before the sun touched the mountains, I was already moving. Not because someone commanded it, because the way demanded it. While others slept in warmth, I stood in cold streams. While they ate until satisfied, I ate only what I needed. While they spoke of what they would do, I was already doing. This is what most people do not understand. They believe strength comes from feeling strong. They believe skill comes from natural talent. They believe mastery happens when inspiration strikes. They are wrong. Strength comes from training when you feel weak. Skill comes from practicing what you cannot do. Mastery comes from showing up when inspiration is nowhere to be found. Your mind is like water in an untrained vessel. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. Fear shapes it into cowardice. Anger shapes it into recklessness. Comfort shapes it into softness. But let me ask you this. What happens when you discipline that water? What happens when you freeze it? It becomes harder than stone. It can cut through rock. It can bear the weight of mountains. This is what training does to your spirit. I trained not just my sword arm, but my attention. I trained not just my body, but my reactions. I trained not just my technique, but my judgment every day, without exception, without complaint. Do you train your mind each morning, or do you let it wander where it will? Do you practice your focus, or do you scatter your attention like seeds in the wind? Do you strengthen your discipline, or do you bend to every impulse that arises? Here is what I learned in 60 years of walking the way. The untrained mind is your greatest enemy. It will betray you faster than any opponent. It will defeat you before you even draw your sword. But the trained mind, the mind that has been forged in the fire of daily practice, this mind cannot be shaken. This mind sees clearly when others are blind. This mind acts decisively when others hesitate. You want to live by the samurai code? Then understand this first truth. The code is not a set of rules you follow when it is convenient. It is a way of being that you practice until it becomes your nature. Training is not something you do. Training is who you are. I trained in rain. I trained in snow. I trained when my body ached and my spirit was heavy. I trained when victory seemed impossible and when defeat felt certain. Because the way has no holidays. The way has no excuses. The way is constant, like the movement of the stars, like the flow of rivers, like the beating of your heart. Start today, not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready, not when conditions are perfect. Today. Train your mind to focus when it wants to scatter. Train your body to move when it wants to rest. Train your spirit to remain calm when chaos surrounds you. This is how you begin to live by the code. This is how you start walking the way. The path I am showing you is not easy, but it is simple. Train every day, without excuse, without end. Your transformation begins the moment you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start training in this. Imperfect one, I could have struck many times. I did not. True power is choosing when not to act. Most men believe power is the ability to destroy. They are wrong. Any fool can break what another has built. Any weakling can lash out when provoked. Any child can scream when frustrated. Real. Power is restraint. I have faced over 60 duels in my lifetime. In each one there were moments when I could have ended my opponent quickly, moments when anger could have guided my blade, moments when pride could have demanded blood. But here is what separates the warrior from the savage. The warrior chooses his moment. The savage is chosen by his moment. Watch how most people live. Someone insults them, and they must respond immediately. Someone challenges them, and they must prove themselves right away. Someone questions their honor, and they must defend it with noise and fury. This is not strength. This is slavery. You are enslaved to every emotion that arises. You are controlled by every person who knows how to provoke you. You are defeated before the battle even begins, because you have no mastery over your own reactions. But let me ask you this. What would happen if you learned to wait? What would happen if you learned to watch? What would happen if you learned to choose your responses instead of being driven by them? This is what I discovered in my years of study. The man who must react immediately is weak. The man who can wait for the perfect moment is invincible. I remember a duel where my opponent spent the first 10 minutes trying to anger me. He spoke of my appearance. He questioned my lineage. He mocked my style. He wanted me to attack in fury so he could use my anger against me. I stood still. I watched. I waited. He grew frustrated by my silence. His insults became louder. His movements became more erratic. His technique became sloppy. When he finally attacked, he was already defeated. His emotion had betrayed his skill. His impatience had destroyed his timing. His need to provoke had revealed his strategy. I struck once. It was over. This is the power of restraint. Not the inability to act, but the wisdom to choose when action serves you. Here's what most people do not understand about respect. They think respect comes from being feared. They think respect comes from never backing down. They think respect comes from always having the last word. They are wrong. Respect comes from being unpredictable in your restraint. When people know you could destroy them but choose not to, they respect your strength. When people know you could speak but choose silence, they listen when you finally do speak. When people know you could retaliate but choose patience, they fear your discipline more than your anger. The untrained man is easy to read. Insult him, and he will rage. Challenge him, and he will fight. Push him, and he will push back. But the trained man, the man who has learned restraint, he is impossible to predict. He might respond immediately. He might wait for hours. He might never respond at all. This uncertainty is his greatest weapon. Do you react to every provocation? Or do you choose your battles? Do you feel compelled to defend every criticism? Or do you let your actions speak? Do you need to prove your strength in every encounter? Or do you reserve your power for when it truly matters? I learned to treat my reactions like arrows in a quiver. Each one was precious. Each one had a purpose. I would not waste them on unworthy targets. When someone tried to provoke me, I would ask myself, does this serve the way? When someone challenged my honor, I would consider, is this the right moment? When anger arose in me, I would pause and think, what would restraint accomplish that reaction cannot? Most of the time, restraint accomplished more. The man who must always prove himself proves only his insecurity. The man who must always have the last word reveals he has nothing important to say. The man who must always win every small battle loses the war. But the man who can hold his power in reserve, who can choose when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait, when to strike and when to withdraw, this man commands respect without demanding it. Start practicing restraint today. Not weakness, but conscious choice. Not submission, but strategic patience. Not fear, but wisdom. The next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Ask yourself what restraint might accomplish that reaction cannot. The next time anger rises in you, wait. See if the feeling passes and clarity remains. True power is not the ability to react. True power is the freedom to choose. Honor is not a matter of life and death. It is how you walk, speak, and choose, especially when no one sees you. Most men think honor is about dramatic moments, the final stand, the glorious sacrifice, the last words before death. They are wrong. Honor is about Tuesday morning when you are tired. Honor is about keeping your word when it costs you something. Honor is about doing what is right when no one will ever know you did it. I have seen men die honorably and live in shame. I have seen men live honorably and die forgotten. Death does not create honor. Honor creates a life worth dying for. But here is what most people do not understand. You are dying every day. Each choice you make either builds honor or destroys it. Each word you speak either strengthens your character or weakens it. Each action you take either moves you toward the way or away from it. You think honor is preserved for special occasions. You think integrity is only tested in great moments. You think character is only revealed in crisis. You are wrong. Honor is tested in small things, when you could take something that is not yours and no one would know. When you could break a promise and face no consequences. When you could lie and gain an advantage, what do you do then? I remember a merchant who tried to cheat me in a small transaction. The amount was insignificant. I could have let it pass. No one else was watching. It would have cost me nothing to ignore his dishonesty. But I did not ignore it, not because the money mattered, but because my honor mattered. Not because others would judge me, but because I would judge myself. This is what dying with honor means while you still live. It means that every single day, in every single choice, you choose to be the person you claim to be. Do you keep your word even when it is inconvenient? Do you tell the truth even when lies would serve you better? Do you do what is right even when no one is watching? Here's what I learned in my years of walking the way. Honor is not something you have. Honor is something you are. It is not a possession that can be taken from you. It is a practice that you either maintain or abandon. The man without honor is already dead. He may walk and breathe and speak, but he is a corpse that does not know it has fallen. He has no substance, no foundation, no core that cannot be shaken. But the man who lives with honor, even if his body fails, even if his plans crumble, even if the world turns against him, this man cannot be truly defeated, because his honor lives independent of circumstances. Let me ask you this. If you died today, would your life have been honorable? Not just the big moments, but the small ones. Not just what others saw, but what you did in private. Not just your successes, but how you handled your failures. Would the person you are in secret be someone you could respect in public? Would the thoughts you think alone be thoughts you could share without shame? Would the choices you make when no one is watching be choices you could defend when everyone is looking? This is the test of honor. Not what you say you believe, but how you live when no one is forcing you to live it. I practiced honor like I practiced swordsmanship, daily, deliberately, with attention to form, with commitment to improvement, with awareness that small mistakes in practice become large failures in battle. Every promise I made, I kept. Not because it was easy, but because my word was my bond. Every truth I knew, I spoke. Not because it was popular, but because lies weaken the spirit. Every right action I saw, I took. Not because it was profitable, but because the way demanded it. This is how you die with honor while you still live. You make every day count. You make every choice matter. You make every moment an opportunity to build or destroy the person you are becoming. Start today. Look at the small compromises you have been making, the little lies you have been telling, the minor promises you have been breaking, the tiny shortcuts you have been taking. These small dishonors are killing your spirit slowly. They are making you weak where you should be strong. They are making you hollow where you should be solid. Choose honor in the next small decision you face. Keep honor in the next promise you make. Live honor in the next moment when no one is watching. This is how you prepare for an honorable death. By living an honorable life, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Your honor is not decided by your final breath. It is built by every breath you take before it. I demanded from myself what others feared to face. The enemy is not outside. It is within. Most men spend their lives fighting the wrong battles. They fight their circumstances. They fight other people. They fight the world for not giving them what they think they deserve. They never fight the only battle that matters, the battle with themselves. I learned this truth early in my training. Every defeat I suffered came from within. Every victory I achieved came from conquering something inside myself. Every failure was a failure of my own discipline, focus, or preparation. The world did not defeat me. I defeated myself. But here is what most people do when they fail. They look for someone to blame. The teacher was unfair. The opponent was lucky. The conditions were not right. The timing was wrong. This is the thinking of the weak. This is how you guarantee you will fail. Again, I took a different path. When I lost a duel, I did not curse my opponent. I studied my mistakes. When I failed to achieve a goal, I did not blame my circumstances. I examined my preparation. When I felt frustrated or angry, I did not lash out at others. I questioned what weakness in myself had created these feelings. This is what being hard on yourself means. Not self-hatred, not self-destruction, not cruelty toward your own spirit. It means holding yourself to a standard higher than what you demand from others. It means taking responsibility for your results instead of finding excuses for your failures. It means looking inward for solutions instead of outward for people to blame. Do you examine your own mistakes as carefully as you notice the mistakes of others? Do you hold yourself accountable for your results as strictly as you judge others for theirs? Do you work on improving yourself as intensely as you criticize others for not improving? Here is what I discovered in decades of self-examination. The flaws you see most clearly in others are usually the flaws you refuse to see in yourself. The things that anger you most about other people are often the things you fear most about your own character. The man who constantly criticizes others for being lazy is usually avoiding his own important work. The man who judges others for being dishonest is usually lying to himself about something. The man who cannot stand weakness in others is usually terrified of his own weakness. But let me ask you this. What would happen if you reverse this pattern? What would happen if you became as hard on yourself as you are on others? What would happen if you demanded from yourself what you expect from everyone else? I will tell you what would happen. You would become dangerous, not to others, but to mediocrity, not to people, but to your own limitations, not to the world, but to everything inside you that keeps you small. I practiced this discipline daily. Each morning, I would examine the previous day, not to punish myself, but to learn. Where did I act without thinking? Where did I speak without purpose? Where did I allow emotion to override judgment? I was ruthless in this examination. I gave myself no excuses. I accepted no justifications. I allowed no self-pity. But here is the crucial point. While I was hard on myself, I was patient with others. While I demanded perfection from my own actions, I accepted imperfection in others. While I criticized my own mistakes harshly, I forgave the mistakes of others easily. This is the way of the warrior. Maximum standards for yourself. Maximum compassion for others. Why? Because you can only control one person, yourself. You can only change one mind, your own. You can only master one life, the life you're living. Everything else is outside your power. Every person you try to change is energy wasted. Every circumstance you try to control is effort misdirected. Every battle you fight with the external world is a battle you are not fighting with your internal world. The man who is easy on himself and hard on others becomes weak and creates enemies. The man who is hard on himself and easy on others becomes strong and earns respect. Start today. Look at your recent failures and disappointments. Instead of finding someone to blame, find something to learn. Instead of identifying what others did wrong, identify what you could have done better. Instead of feeling angry at circumstances, feel curious about your own responses. This is not about self-attack. This is about self-responsibility. This is not about self-hatred. This is about self-improvement. Ask yourself harder questions. Set yourself higher standards. Demand from yourself what you have been demanding from others, and watch what happens to your power. Watch what happens to your focus. Watch what happens to your results. The enemy is not outside. It is within, and the only way to defeat it is to face it honestly, fight it bravely, and conquer it completely. This is the path of the warrior. This is the way of strength. This is how you become invincible, not by defeating all enemies, but by becoming your own greatest ally. I walked alone not to rebel, but to see clearly. Only in solitude can you hear the truth inside you. Most people are afraid to be alone with themselves. They surround themselves with noise, distraction, and the opinions of others. They check what everyone else is doing before they decide what they should do. They ask for approval before they act. They seek validation before they believe. This is not living. This is following. I chose a different path. I walked alone, not because I hated people, but because I needed to know what I thought before I heard what others thought. Not because I wanted to rebel, but because I wanted to understand what was true for me. Here is what most people do not understand about solitude. They think it means isolation. They think it means rejecting others. They think it means arrogance or superiority. They are wrong. Solitude means having the courage to face yourself without the buffer of other people's opinions. It means being willing to sit with your own thoughts without immediately seeking someone else's thoughts to replace them. It means learning to trust your own judgment before you ask for everyone else's judgment. Do you know what you think about important matters? Or do you only know what others have told you to think? Do you know what you value? Or do you only know what you have been taught to value? Do you know who you are? Or do you only know who others expect you to be? These are questions you can only answer in solitude. These are truths you can only discover when you stop listening to the noise of the world and start hearing the voice of your own spirit. I spent years in the mountains, not hiding from the world but preparing for it, not avoiding people, but learning to stand among them without losing myself, not rejecting society, but understanding my place in it. In those years of solitude, I learned things that no teacher could have taught me. I discovered strengths I did not know I had. I faced fears I had been avoiding. I found clarity that had been buried under the expectations and opinions of others. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not just physically alone, but mentally alone. Not just away from people, but away from their voices in your head. Not just in silence, but in your own silence. Most people cannot handle 5 minutes of real solitude. They immediately reach for their phone. They turn on music. They start a conversation. They do anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. This is weakness. This is fear. This is a sign that you do not trust yourself enough to be your own company. The man who cannot stand alone will never truly stand at all. He will always be leaning on someone else's opinion. He will always be dependent on someone else's approval. He will always be following someone else's path. But the man who can stand alone, who can think his own thoughts, make his own decisions, and trust his own judgment, this man cannot be controlled. This man cannot be manipulated. This man cannot be defeated by the opinions of others. I am not telling you to become a hermit. I am not telling you to reject all advice. I am not telling you to ignore the wisdom of others. I am telling you to know yourself first, to trust yourself first, to stand on your own foundation before you build with others. Here is what I learned in my years of solitude. The crowd is usually wrong. The popular opinion is usually shallow. The easy path is usually the wrong path, but you can only see this clearly when you step away from the crowd. You can only think clearly when you stop listening to the noise. You can only find your own way when you stop following everyone else's way. Start practicing solitude today, not isolation, but independence, not rejection of others, but acceptance of yourself, not running from the world, but preparing to engage with it from a position of strength. Spend time alone with your thoughts. Sit in silence without distraction. Walk without music. Think without immediately seeking other opinions. Ask yourself what you really believe, what you really want, what you really value, what you really think is right, And then, this is crucial, trust what you discover. Act on what you learn. Stand on what you know to be true. The world will always try to tell you what to think. The crowd will always try to pull you in their direction. Other people will always have opinions about how you should live. But the way is not found in following others. The way is found in following yourself. Not your impulses, but your deepest wisdom. Not your fears, but your highest understanding. Not your weaknesses, but your truest strength. Stand alone, not to defy the world, but to understand yourself. And from that understanding, engage with the world as who you truly are, not as who others expect you to be. This is the path of the warrior. This is the way of strength. This is how you become unshakable, not by having others hold you up, but by standing on your own foundation. A man ruled by feeling is easy to defeat. Let anger pass, let fear speak, but do not obey it. I have watched strong men become weak because they could not master their emotions. I have seen skilled warriors lose to inferior opponents because anger clouded their judgment. I have witnessed intelligent people make foolish decisions because fear controlled their actions. Emotion is not your enemy, but emotion as your master will destroy you. Most people believe they are their emotions. When they feel angry, they think they are angry. When they feel afraid, they think they are afraid. When they feel sad, they think they are sad. This is their first mistake. You are not your emotions. You are the one who experiences emotions. You are not the storm. You are the mountain that watches the storm pass. But here's what most people do when strong emotions arise. They immediately obey them. They feel angry, so they lash out. They feel afraid, so they retreat. They feel desire, so they pursue. They feel hatred, so they attack. This is not strength. This is slavery. The untrained man is like a ship without an anchor in a storm. Every emotion that arises tosses him in a different direction. He has no stability, no consistency, no ability to stay on course when the winds of feeling blow against him. But the trained man, the man who has learned to observe his emotions without being controlled by them, he is like a mountain in that same storm. The winds may howl around him, but they cannot move him from his foundation. Do you feel your emotions, or do your emotions feel you? Do you experience anger, fear, and desire? Or do anger, fear, and desire experience you? Do you watch your feelings arise and pass, or do your feelings watch you be tossed around by their power? Here is what I learned through years of training. Emotions are information. They tell you something about your situation, but they should never make your decisions for you. Anger tells you that something has violated your sense of justice or respect. This is useful information. But anger should not decide how you respond to that violation. Fear tells you that something threatens your safety or security. This is valuable information, but fear should not decide how you face that threat. Desire tells you what attracts you or what you think you need. This is important information. But desire should not decide what you pursue or how you pursue it. Let me ask you this. What would happen if you learned to feel your emotions fully, but act from wisdom instead of feeling? What would happen if you could experience anger without being driven by it? What would happen if you could acknowledge fear without being paralyzed by it? I will tell you what would happen. You would become unpredictable to your enemies and reliable to your allies. You would make better decisions because your judgment would not be clouded by the urgency of emotion. You would become stronger because your actions would come from principle instead of impulse. I practiced this discipline in every duel I fought. I felt the fear that comes before battle. I experienced the anger that arises when insulted. I knew the excitement that comes with victory and the disappointment that comes with setback. But I did not let these feelings choose my actions. I felt them, acknowledged them, learned from them, and then I acted according to what the situation required, not what my emotions demanded. This is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is immediate, emotional, and usually regrettable. Response is considered purposeful, and usually effective. The man who can only react is predictable. His enemies know exactly how to manipulate him. Push this button and he will attack. Pull this lever and he will retreat. Play this note and he will dance to their tune. But the man who can respond instead of react, he is dangerous. He cannot be controlled through emotional manipulation. He cannot be predicted through understanding his triggers. He cannot be defeated by anyone who relies on making him lose control. Start practicing this discipline today. The next time strong emotion arises, do not immediately act on it. Feel it fully, experience it completely. But then pause and ask, what does this feeling tell me about the situation? What would wisdom do here instead of emotion? This is not about becoming emotionless. This is about becoming emotionally intelligent. This is not about suppressing feelings. This is about choosing responses. The warrior feels everything but is controlled by nothing. The warrior experiences all emotions but is ruled by none. This is your goal. Not to become a stone that feels nothing, but to become a mountain that feels everything and remains unmoved. Let anger arise and pass like clouds across the sky. Let fear speak its warnings, then choose your course based on wisdom, not worry. Let desire show you what you value, then pursue it with discipline, not desperation. You are not your emotions. You are the master of your emotions. And a master does not take orders from servants. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path to unshakable strength. This is how you become truly free, not from feeling, but from being controlled by feeling. Battle, like life, has rhythm. If you move offbeat, you lose. Learn to feel timing, then strike when it breaks. Everything in existence moves to rhythm. Your heart beats in rhythm. Your breath flows in rhythm. The seasons change in rhythm. The sun rises and sets in rhythm. The tide flows in and out in rhythm. And every person you encounter, every situation you face, every opportunity that presents itself, all of these have rhythm too. Most people live their entire lives without ever feeling this rhythm. They move through the world deaf to its natural beat. They speak at the wrong moments. They act at the wrong times. They strike when they should wait, and wait when they should strike. This is why they struggle. This is why they fail. This is why they feel constantly out of step with life itself. But I learned to feel the rhythm. In every duel I fought, I could sense the natural tempo of my opponent. I could feel when he was about to attack and when he was about to defend. I could sense when he was strong and when he was weak. I could feel when he was focused and when his attention wandered, and then I would match his rhythm until the perfect moment came, the moment when his rhythm broke, when his timing faltered. When a gap appeared in his defense, that is when I would strike. Do you feel the rhythm of the people around you? Do you sense when someone is open to what you have to say and when they are closed? Do you know when to push forward and when to pull back? Do you recognize when opportunity is approaching and when it is passing? Here is what most people do. They force their timing on every situation. They speak when they want to speak, regardless of whether anyone is ready to listen. They act when they feel like acting, regardless of whether the moment is right. They pursue what they want when they want it, regardless of whether the conditions support success. This is like trying to dance to music only you can hear. This is like trying to surf against the wave instead of with it. This is like trying to plant seeds in winter and wondering why nothing grows. But let me ask you this. What would happen if you learned to feel the natural rhythm of situations before you acted? What would happen if you learned to sense the right moment instead of forcing the wrong moment? What would happen if you learned to move with the flow of life instead of against it? I will tell you what would happen. Your actions would become effortless. Your words would land with power. Your decisions would seem perfectly timed. People would call you lucky, but you would know the truth. You had simply learned to feel the rhythm. In conversation, there is a rhythm. There are moments when people are ready to hear new ideas and moments when they are not. There are times when they are open to influence and times when they are resistant. There are beats when you should speak and beats when you should listen. In Business, there is a rhythm. There are seasons for expansion and seasons for conservation. There are moments when markets are ready for new products and moments when they are not. There are times to be aggressive and times to be patient. In relationships, there is a rhythm. There are moments for closeness and moments for space. There are times for serious conversation and times for lightness. There are beats when you should give and beats when you should receive. In personal growth, there is a rhythm. There are periods for intense effort and periods for rest. There are times for learning new things and times for practicing what you already know. There are seasons for external action and seasons for internal reflection. The master feels all of these rhythms. He does not force his will upon the world. He finds the natural flow and moves with it. He waits for the right moment, and when it comes, he acts with perfect timing. This is not passivity. This is not waiting for life to happen to you. This is active sensitivity. This is conscious awareness. This is the difference between forcing your way through life and flowing your way through life. Start practicing this awareness today. Before you speak in your next conversation, feel the rhythm of the exchange. Is the other person ready to hear what you want to say? Before you make your next decision, sense the timing of the situation. Is this the right moment, or should you wait? Pay attention to the natural rhythms around you. Notice when people are most receptive to new ideas. Observe when opportunities naturally arise. Feel the ebb and flow of energy in every situation you encounter, and then learn to wait. Learn to be patient. Learn to hold your action until the moment when the rhythm breaks and the opening appears. This is the skill that separates the master from the amateur. The amateur forces his timing on the world. The master feels the world's timing and moves with it. When you learn to feel the rhythm, you will never be offbeat again. When you learn to sense the timing, you will never act too early or too late again. When you learn to move with the flow, you will never struggle against life again. This is the way of the warrior. This is the secret of perfect timing. This is how you become truly effective, not by forcing your rhythm on the world, but by finding the world's rhythm and dancing with it. To win is not to be proud. To lose is not to be broken. You are only defeated when your spirit is swayed. Most people live their lives as slaves to outcomes. When they win, they soar with pride and believe they are invincible. When they lose, they crash into despair and believe they are worthless. This emotional roller coaster will destroy you. This attachment to results will make you weak in victory and weaker in defeat. I fought over 60 duels in my lifetime. I won most of them. But I learned as much from my losses as from my victories, perhaps more. Here is what I discovered. Victory and defeat are both imposters. They are not the truth about who you are. They are simply outcomes that arise from the intersection of your preparation, your execution, and circumstances beyond your control. The man who becomes intoxicated by victory loses his hunger for improvement. He stops training as hard. He stops paying attention to details. He starts believing his own legend instead of continuing to build it. The man who becomes devastated by defeat loses his courage for the next attempt. He starts doubting his abilities. He begins fearing failure more than he desires success. He becomes timid when he should be bold. Both men have made the same fundamental error. They have confused temporary outcomes with permanent identity. But let me ask you this. Who were you before your last victory? Who were you before your last defeat? Were you a different person? Or were you the same person who simply experienced different results? The truth is this. You are not your victories. You are not your defeats. You are the one who shows up to compete, regardless of what happened last time. I remember a duel where I was beaten by a superior opponent. As I lay on the ground, defeated and humiliated, I felt the familiar urge to make excuses. He was lucky. The conditions were unfair. I was not at my best. But then I chose a different path. I looked at my defeat as information, not as identity. What had I done wrong? What could I learn? How could I improve? That defeat taught me more about swordsmanship than 10 victories had. It showed me weaknesses in my technique I had not noticed. It revealed gaps in my strategy I had not seen. It forced me to evolve in ways that victory never could. Similarly, I remember victories that came too easily, opponents who were not worthy of the duel, wins that required little effort or skill. These victories were actually more dangerous than defeats because they tempted me to become complacent. Do you celebrate your victories as if they make you permanently superior? Do you mourn your defeats as if they make you permanently inferior? Do you let outcomes determine your worth instead of letting your character determine your response to outcomes? Here is what I learned to do instead. I celebrated victories briefly, then immediately returned to training. I mourned defeats briefly, then immediately looked for lessons. I neither let success go to my head nor let failure go to my heart. This is the way of detachment. Not indifference, I cared deeply about my results. But I did not let results define me. I did not let outcomes control my emotions. I did not let victory make me weak or defeat make me quit. The warrior understands that every victory is temporary. Every defeat is temporary. Every outcome is simply a step on an endless path of improvement. What matters is not whether you win or lose today. What matters is whether you show up tomorrow. What matters is not the result of your last attempt. What matters is the quality of your next attempt. This perspective will set you free. Free from the prison of needing to win every time. Free from the fear of losing that prevents you from trying. Free from the emotional chaos that comes from tying your worth to your results. Start practicing this detachment today. The next time you succeed at something, celebrate briefly, then ask, what can I do even better next time? The next time you fail at something, feel the disappointment, then ask, what can I learn from this experience? Train yourself to see victories and defeats as information, not as identity. Train yourself to respond to outcomes with curiosity, not with ego. Train yourself to stay balanced, regardless of whether the world is celebrating you or criticizing you. The man who can remain steady in victory and defeat cannot be broken by either. The man who can learn from both success and failure cannot be stopped by either. The man who can detach from outcomes while still caring about excellence cannot be defeated by anything external. Remember this truth. The only real defeat is the defeat of your spirit. The only real victory is the victory over yourself. Everything else is just feedback on your current level of development. Win or lose, you are still walking the way. Win or lose, you are still growing stronger. Win or lose, you are still becoming who you are meant to become. This is the path of the warrior. This is the secret of unshakable strength. This is how you become truly free, not from outcomes, but from being controlled by outcomes. Your sword is only as strong as your focus. Scatter your mind, and you lose the battle before it begins. A dull blade cannot cut through silk. A scattered mind cannot cut through confusion. Most people believe that strength comes from the body. They train their muscles, they build their endurance, they perfect their techniques, but they neglect the one weapon that determines victory or defeat in every encounter, the mind. I have seen physically powerful men defeated by smaller opponents because their minds were unfocused. I have watched skilled swordsmen lose to inferior techniques because their attention was divided. I have witnessed intelligent people make foolish decisions because their thoughts were scattered. The mind is your primary weapon. Everything else is secondary. But here is what most people do with their minds. They let them wander wherever they please. They think about yesterday's failures while trying to focus on today's challenges. They worry about tomorrow's problems while attempting to solve today's problems. They scatter their attention across a dozen different concerns and wonder why they cannot focus on any of them effectively. This is like trying to fight with a broken sword. This is like trying to see with clouded eyes. This is like trying to hear with deafened ears. Do you control your mind, or does your mind control you? Do you direct your thoughts where you need them to go, or do your thoughts drag you wherever they want to wander? Do you focus your attention like a blade, or do you scatter it like dust in the wind? Here is what I learned through years of training. The untrained mind is your greatest enemy. It will betray you, distract you, and defeat you faster than any external opponent. But the trained mind, the mind that has been sharpened through discipline and focus, this mind is your greatest weapon. This mind can cut through confusion like a sword cuts through silk. This mind can see opportunities that others miss. This mind can solve problems that others cannot even understand. I trained my mind the same way I trained my sword technique, daily, deliberately, with intense focus and unwavering commitment. Every morning, I would practice holding my attentions on a single point. Sometimes it was my breath. Sometimes it was a single thought. Sometimes it was a visual object. The specific focus mattered less than the practice of focusing. When my mind wandered, and it always did at first, I would gently but firmly bring it back to the chosen point of focus. No judgment, no frustration, just the quiet discipline of returning attention to where I had directed it to go. This is how you sharpen the mind, not through complex philosophy or intellectual study, but through the simple practice of learning to control where you place your attention. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you practiced focusing your mind? When did you last sit quietly and train your attention like you would train any other skill? When did you last treat your mind like the weapon it is and give it the maintenance it requires? Most people never do this. They expect their minds to perform at peak level without any training. They demand focus from minds that have never practiced focusing. They want clarity from minds that have never been disciplined. This is like expecting to be a master swordsman without ever picking up a sword. This is like expecting to run a marathon without ever training for distance. This is like expecting to play beautiful music without ever practicing an instrument. The mind, like any tool, must be sharpened through use. The mind, like any muscle, must be strengthened through exercise. The mind, like any skill, must be developed through practice. Start training your mind today. Choose a simple focus, your breath, a word, a visual point. Sit quietly for just 5 minutes and practice holding your attention on that focus. When your mind wanders, notice where it went, then gently bring it back. Do not expect perfection. Immediately, do not become frustrated when your attention scatters. This is normal. This is part of the training. The strength comes not from never losing focus, but from constantly returning focus to where you direct it. As your mind becomes sharper, you will notice the difference in everything you do. Your work will become more effective because your attention will be more concentrated. Your relationships will improve because your presence will be more complete. Your decisions will become clearer because your thinking will be less cluttered. The sharp mind cuts through problems that defeat the dull mind. The focused mind sees solutions that escape the scattered mind. The trained mind achieves results that are impossible for the untrained mind. This is not mystical. This is practical. This is not philosophy. This is technique. Your mind is your most important weapon. Keep it sharp. Keep it focused. Keep it under your control. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path to mental mastery. This is how you win battles before they even begin, not with superior force, but with superior focus. Do not reach for tools you do not understand. Your strength is not in having more, but in knowing what you hold. I once watched a samurai lose his life because he tried to use a weapon he had not mastered. In the heat of battle, his primary sword was knocked from his hand. Instead of continuing with techniques he knew, he reached for a secondary weapon he had barely practiced. His unfamiliarity with the weapon betrayed him. His timing was wrong. His distance was wrong. His technique was clumsy. An opponent who should have been defeated easily killed him instead. This is the danger of relying on tools you have not mastered. This is the folly of believing that more options automatically mean more power. Most people make this same mistake in life. They accumulate skills they never develop. They learn techniques they never practice. They collect knowledge they never apply. They believe that having many weapons makes them strong, when in truth, having a few weapons mastered makes them dangerous. Do you know what you truly know? Do you understand what you actually understand? Can you use what you claim to possess? Or do you mistake familiarity for mastery, knowledge for skill, theory for practice? Here is what I learned through decades of training. It is better to master one technique completely than to know 10 techniques superficially. It is better to understand one principle deeply than to memorize 100 principles shallowly. It is better to have one skill you can rely on than to have many skills you cannot trust. The master is not the person who knows the most techniques. The master is the person who can execute basic techniques perfectly under any conditions. I spent years perfecting simple cuts, basic stances, fundamental movements. While other students rushed to learn flashy techniques and complex combinations, I practiced the basics until they became extensions of my will. This is why I was never defeated. Not because I knew more techniques than my opponents, but because I knew my techniques better than my opponents knew theirs. But let me ask you this. What are the fundamental skills in your life that you have neglected while chasing advanced techniques? What basic abilities could you develop more deeply instead of constantly acquiring new abilities? What simple tools could you master instead of collecting complex tools you barely understand? In conversation, most people try to learn sophisticated persuasion techniques before they master the basics of listening carefully and speaking clearly. In business, most people chase complex strategies before they master the fundamentals of serving customers well and managing money wisely. In relationships, most people seek advanced psychology before they master the basics of honesty, kindness, and reliability. This is backwards. This is why they struggle. This is why they fail when pressure increases and stakes get higher. The fundamentals are called fundamentals because they are the foundation everything else is built upon. You cannot build a strong structure on a weak foundation. You cannot execute advanced techniques reliably without mastering basic techniques first. I practiced the same basic sword cuts thousands of times, the same fundamental stances thousands of times, the same essential movements thousands of times, not because I was slow to learn, but because I understood that mastery lives in the basics, not in the complexities. When the moment of truth came, when life and death hung in the balance, I did not need to think about what technique to use. My body knew, my hands knew, my sword knew. The basics had become so deeply ingrained that they flowed automatically from intuition rather than conscious thought. This is what mastery looks like. Not the ability to perform a technique once under perfect conditions, but the ability to perform it flawlessly under any conditions. Not knowledge about what should work, but certainty about what will work. Start mastering what you already have before you acquire what you do not have. Deepen your understanding of basic skills before you chase advanced skills. Perfect simple techniques before you attempt complex techniques. In whatever field you are working, whether it is your career, your relationships, your health, or your personal development, identify the fundamental skills that everything else depends upon. Then practice those fundamentals until they become automatic. This is not glamorous work. This is not exciting work. But this is the work that creates unshakable competence. This is the work that builds reliable strength. This is the work that prepares you for moments when everything depends on your ability to perform under pressure. The weapon you have mastered will serve you when the weapon you have merely learned will fail you. The skill you have developed deeply will save you when the skill you have practiced superficially will abandon you. Master what you have before you reach for what you lack. Perfect what you know before you learn what you do not know. Trust what you have trained before you experiment with what you have not trained. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path to reliable strength. This is how you become truly formidable, not by knowing more than others, but by knowing what you know better than others know what they know. Desire is the weight that slows the warrior. Let go, and you will move faster than thought. The strongest chain that binds a man is not made of iron. It is made of wanting. Most people live their entire lives as slaves to their desires. They want more money, so they sacrifice their peace. They want more status, so they sacrifice their integrity. They want more pleasure, so they sacrifice their discipline. They want more security, so they sacrifice their freedom. And the more they get of what they want, the more they want of what they do not have. This is not strength. This is weakness. This is not freedom. This is the most subtle form of imprisonment. I learned this truth through years of wandering. The less I needed, the stronger I became. The less I wanted, the freer I became. The less I grasped, the more I could accomplish. But here is what most people do not understand about wanting. They think desire motivates them. They believe that wanting something gives them energy to pursue it. They assume that the stronger their desire, the more likely they are to achieve their goals. They are wrong. Desire does not motivate. Desire distracts. Desire does not energize. Desire exhausts. Desire does not help you achieve your goals. Desire makes you desperate, and desperation makes you weak. Do you act from want or from purpose? Do you move toward goals because you need them or because you choose them? Do you pursue outcomes because you cannot live without them or because you want to see what you can accomplish? Here is what I discovered about the nature of wanting. The man who needs something is already defeated by that need. He will compromise his principles to get it. He will accept poor terms to secure it. He will tolerate disrespect to keep it. But the man who needs nothing cannot be controlled by anyone. He cannot be manipulated by promises. He cannot be threatened by the loss of what he does not depend upon. He cannot be bought with what he does not desire. This is true power, not the power to get what you want, but the power to not need what you want. I practiced this discipline daily. When I felt the pull of desire, for comfort, for recognition, for security, I would examine that feeling. What was I trying to get from the external world that I could only truly find within myself? Comfort from my circumstances instead of peace from my practice. Recognition from others instead of confidence from my competence. Security from my possessions instead of strength from my preparation. But let me ask you this. What if you already had everything you truly needed? What if you stopped chasing what you lack and started appreciating what you possess? What if you pursued goals not from desperation but from curiosity about what you could accomplish? This does not mean becoming passive. This does not mean losing ambition. This does not mean accepting mediocrity. This means acting from strength instead of need. This means pursuing excellence instead of pursuing relief from insecurity. This means choosing your path instead of being driven by your cravings. The warrior without attachment fights better because he is not afraid to lose what he does not depend upon. The warrior without need negotiates better because he can walk away from any deal that does not serve him. The warrior without grasping achieves more because his energy goes into action instead of into wanting. I remember duels where my opponents were desperate to win. I could see it in their eyes, feel it in their movements, sense it in their technique. That desperation made them predictable. It made them take unnecessary risks. It made them vulnerable to strategies that would not have worked against a calmer fighter, but I fought with no attachment to victory. If I won, good. If I lost, good. My worth did not depend on the outcome. My identity was not tied to the result. I could fight with complete commitment and complete detachment at the same time. This paradox is the key to true power, total engagement without emotional attachment, complete effort without desperate need, full presence without grasping at outcomes. Start practicing this freedom today. Look at what you think you need to be happy. Question whether you actually need it or simply want it. Consider whether pursuing it is moving you toward strength or toward dependency. Choose goals that inspire you rather than goals that you think will complete you. Pursue achievements that express your potential rather than achievements that you think will fill your emptiness. Act from your abundance rather than from your lack. Seek nothing that you cannot be equally content without. Grasp nothing that you cannot release without regret. Need nothing that you cannot lose without being broken. This is not about having nothing. This is about needing nothing. This is not about wanting nothing. This is about not being controlled by what you want. When you can act without attachment, you become unstoppable. When you can pursue without grasping, you become free. When you can strive without needing, you become truly powerful. This is the way of the warrior. This is the secret of unshakable strength. This is how you become truly free. Not by getting everything you want, but by wanting nothing you cannot live without. I never wasted words. When I spoke, I meant it. So my enemies listened and my allies trusted. Most people talk too much and say too little. They fill the air with noise but communicate nothing of substance. They speak to hear themselves speak, rather than to convey meaning. They use many words to say what could be said with few. This is weakness. This is waste. This is why their words carry no weight. The power of speech lies not in quantity, but in quality. Not in volume, but in precision. Not in frequency, but in impact. I learned early in my training that the mouth can be as dangerous as any weapon, both to your enemies and to yourself. Words carelessly spoken can create enemies unnecessarily. Words frequently spoken lose their power through repetition. Words thoughtlessly spoken can reveal weaknesses you should keep hidden. But words carefully chosen, precisely delivered, and backed by authentic intent, these words can cut deeper than any blade. Do you speak from impulse or from intention? Do you talk because you have something to say, or because you feel compelled to say something? Do your words serve a purpose, or do they simply fill silence? Here is what I observed about the nature of speech. The man who talks constantly is rarely listened to carefully. The man who speaks frequently is seldom taken seriously. The man who explains too much appears uncertain about what he is explaining, but the man who speaks little commands attention when he does speak. The man who chooses his words carefully gives them weight. The man who can remain silent until the right moment strikes with verbal precision. I practiced silence as much as I practiced swordsmanship. I learned to be comfortable with quiet spaces in conversation. I trained myself to listen more than I spoke. I developed the discipline to think before I spoke, rather than speak while I thought. This discipline served me in every encounter. Negotiations, my silence made others reveal more than they intended. In conflicts, my restraint made my eventual words carry more impact. In teaching, my careful speech made my lessons more memorable. But let me ask you this. What would happen if you spoke half as much but chose your words twice as carefully? What would happen if you listened more than you talked? What would happen if you only spoke when your words could accomplish something that silence could not? Most people are afraid of silence. They rush to fill every pause with words. They explain their explanations. They justify their justifications. They talk past the point where their words are adding value. This fear of silence weakens their communication. It dilutes their message. It makes them appear uncertain and insecure. But the warrior who has mastered speech understands that silence is not empty space to be filled. Silence is powerful space to be used strategically. Silence before speaking gives weight to your words. Silence after speaking gives others time to absorb your meaning. Silence during conflict forces others to reveal their thoughts. Silence in negotiation creates pressure that often works in your favor. I remember encounters where my opponents talked themselves into defeat. They revealed their strategies through excessive explanation. They showed their weaknesses through unnecessary justification. They undermined their own positions through compulsive speech. While they talked, I listened. While they explained, I understood. While they revealed, I concealed. And when the moment came for me to speak, my words carried the weight of careful thought and strategic timing. This is the power of disciplined speech. Not the power to say everything you think, but the power to think everything before you say it. Not the power to fill every silence, but the power to use silence purposefully. Start practicing this discipline today. Before you speak, Ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish with these words? Is this the right time to say this? Will saying this move me closer to my goal or further from it? Learn to be comfortable with silence. Let others fill the quiet spaces while you listen and learn. Speak only when your words can accomplish something that silence cannot. When you do speak, speak with conviction. Say what you mean. Mean what you say. Choose words that carry weight, rather than words that simply carry sound. The man who speaks constantly is like a sword that is always drawn. It loses its power to intimidate through overuse. But the man who speaks rarely is like a sword that remains sheathed. When it is finally drawn, everyone pays attention. Your words are weapons. Use them sparingly. Aim them carefully. Deploy them strategically. This is how you develop verbal power. This is how you command respect through communication. This is how you make your words matter, not by saying more, but by saying less, and meaning everything. Mastery is not an achievement. It is a path, and every step must be taken with full presence. Most people believe that mastery is a destination. They think there is a point where they will have learned enough, practiced enough, grown enough. They imagine a moment when they can say, "I have arrived. I am now a master." This is their fundamental misunderstanding. This is why they stop growing. This is why they become weak, even after becoming strong. Mastery is not a place you reach. Mastery is a way you walk. It is not something you achieve once. It is something you practice daily. It is not a goal you accomplish. It is a standard you maintain. I have spent over 60 years studying the way of the sword. In all that time, I have never reached a point where there was nothing left to learn. Every day brought new insights. Every encounter revealed new depths. Every moment of practice showed me something I had not seen before. The more I understood, the more I realized how much I did not understand. The more skilled I became, the more I appreciated the vastness of what remained to be explored. The deeper I went into the way, the more I saw how infinite the path truly is. Do you think of learning as something you do until you know enough? Do you practice until you feel competent and then stop improving? Do you pursue growth until you reach a comfortable level and then maintain that level? This approach will make you weak. This thinking will make you stagnant. This mindset will make you vulnerable to anyone who continues growing while you stop. Here is what I learned about the nature of true mastery. The beginner practices to become competent. The intermediate practitioner practices to become skilled. The advanced practitioner practices to become expert. But the master practices because practice itself is the way. The master learns not to accumulate knowledge, but to deepen understanding. The master grows not to reach a destination, but because growth is the natural expression of a living spirit. This is why the master is never satisfied and never dissatisfied. Never satisfied because there is always more to discover. Never dissatisfied because each moment of practice is complete in itself. I trained every day not because I was trying to reach some final level of ability, but because daily training was how I chose to live. I studied continuously not because I was preparing for some future test, but because study was how I chose to engage with existence. But let me ask you this. What would happen if you approached your work, your relationships, your personal development, not as projects to complete, but as ongoing practices to deepen? What would happen if you stopped trying to arrive somewhere and started focusing on how you travel? Most people exhaust themselves trying to reach the end of the path. They burn out because they are running toward a finish line that does not exist. They become frustrated because they expect their growth to eventually be complete. But the warrior who understands the true nature of mastery never burns out because he is not running toward anything. He is simply walking steadily, consistently, with full presence in each step. This perspective changes everything. Instead of practicing until you get good enough, you practice because practice is valuable in itself. Instead of learning until you know enough, you learn because learning is how you stay alive spiritually. Instead of growing until you become who you want to be, you grow because growth is the natural state of a healthy soul. I found joy in this approach. Every day brought opportunities to discover something new about techniques I had practiced thousands of times. Every encounter taught me something fresh about principles I thought I understood completely. Every moment of training revealed depths in basics I had been doing for decades. This is the secret of staying passionate about your path. This is how you maintain enthusiasm for areas where you already have expertise. This is how you continue improving even after others consider you a master. There is no graduation from the E way. There is no point where you can stop learning and still remain strong. There is no level where you can coast and still continue growing. Start thinking of your important pursuits as lifelong practices rather than temporary projects. Approach your skills as depths to explore rather than heights to reach. Engage with your development as a way of being rather than a way to get somewhere. Find joy in the daily practice itself, not just in the results the practice produces. Find satisfaction in the process of improvement, not just in the achievement of goals. Find meaning in the journey of discovery, not just in the accumulation of knowledge. The way has no end because life has no end. The path has no final destination because existence itself is dynamic, always changing, always offering new opportunities for growth and understanding. This is not a burden. This is a gift. This is not overwhelming. This is liberating. You never have to worry about running out of room to grow. You never have to fear that your learning days are over. You never have to accept that your best years are behind you. The E way is infinite, and you have infinite opportunities to walk it more deeply, more skillfully, more consciously than you walked it yesterday. This is the perspective of the master. This is the mindset of the warrior. This is how you stay strong, stay growing, and stay alive to the endless possibilities that each day brings. In battle, confusion surrounds you, but you must move cleanly without hesitation. This is how you stay untouched. Chaos is the natural state of conflict. When pressure rises and stakes increase, everything becomes confused. Plans fall apart, strategies become useless. Unexpected problems arise from every direction. Most people respond to chaos by becoming chaotic themselves. They panic when their plan stops working. They scatter their attention when multiple problems arise. They become indecisive when they cannot see clearly what to do next. This reaction to chaos creates more chaos. This is how defeat spreads. This is how strong people become weak under pressure. But I learned a different way. I learned to move straight through chaos, not around it, not away from it, straight through the center of it. When battle erupted around me and confusion reigned, I did not try to understand everything that was happening. I did not attempt to solve every problem at once. I did not wait for clarity about the entire situation. Instead, I identified the most direct path to my objective and moved along that path with complete commitment. I ignored distractions. I dismissed complications. I cut through confusion with simple, direct action. Do you become more complex when situations become complex? Do you become more scattered when circumstances become chaotic? Do you become more indecisive when pressure increases and clarity decreases? This is exactly backwards. This is why most people fail when stakes get high. This is why they collapse when they most need to be strong. Here is what I learned about moving through chaos. The more complex the situation becomes, the simpler your response must be. The more confused your environment becomes, the clearer your thinking must be. The more uncertain your circumstances become, the more decisive your actions must be. Chaos cannot touch the man who moves with single-minded focus toward his goal. Confusion cannot defeat the man who acts with unwavering commitment to his chosen path. Complications cannot stop the man who cuts through problems instead of getting tangled in them. But let me ask you this. When everything around you becomes complicated, do you simplify your approach or complicate it further? When multiple demands compete for your attention, do you focus on what matters most or try to handle everything at once? When you cannot see the entire path clearly, do you take the next step you can see or wait until the whole journey becomes visible? I remember battles where my opponents became paralyzed by the complexity of the situation. They could not decide which threat to address first. They could not choose between multiple possible strategies. They could not act because they could not see clearly how their actions would turn out. While they hesitated, I moved. While they calculated, I struck. While they tried to understand everything, I focused on the one thing that mattered most in that moment. This is the power of moving straight. Not the power of seeing everything clearly, but the power of acting decisively with limited information. Not the power of having perfect plans, but the power of taking imperfect action toward clear objectives. The straight path is not always the easiest path. It is not always the safest path. It is not always the most clever path. But it is always the most direct path from where you are to where you need to be. Most people avoid the straight path because it requires them to face obstacles directly instead of finding ways around them. They prefer complicated strategies to simple actions. They choose elegant plans over straightforward execution. But complicated strategies fail when pressure increases. Elegant plans collapse when chaos erupts. Only simple, direct action remains reliable when everything else becomes unreliable. Start practicing this discipline today. The next time you face a complex situation, resist the urge to create a complex response. Instead, identify the most direct action that would move you toward your goal and take that action immediately. When multiple problems demand your attention, do not try to solve them all simultaneously. Choose the most important problem and focus all your energy on solving it completely before you move to the next one. When you cannot see clearly how things will turn out, do not wait for perfect visibility. Take the next step you can see clearly, and trust that the step after that will become visible once you take it. This is how you move through chaos without being touched by it. This is how you remain strong when everything around you becomes weak. This is how you achieve your objectives, even when achieving them seems impossible. The straight path cuts through confusion like a sword cuts through silk. The direct approach penetrates chaos like an arrow penetrates its target. The simple action succeeds where complex strategies fail. Move straight. Act directly. Cut through complications with the blade of focused intention. This is the way of the warrior. This is the secret of effectiveness under pressure. This is how you win battles that others cannot even fight, not by avoiding chaos, but by moving through it with unwavering commitment to your chosen direction. Luck is for gamblers. You are not a gambler. Prepare so completely that fortune has no say. Most people depend on luck to save them from their lack of preparation. They hope things will work out. They assume circumstances will favor them. They expect good fortune to compensate for poor planning. This is not strategy. This is wishful thinking. This is how the weak comfort themselves before they fail. Luck is what the unprepared call the results of the prepared. Fortune is what the undisciplined call the consequences of discipline. Chance is what the unfocused call the outcomes of focus. Never relied on luck because I never needed to rely on luck. I prepared so thoroughly that what others called my good fortune was simply the natural result of my readiness. Do you prepare for what you hope will happen? Or do you prepare for what you know could happen? Do you train for ideal conditions? Or do you train for the worst conditions you might face? Do you rely on everything going according to plan? Or do you prepare for the moment when plans become useless? Here's what I learned about the relationship between preparation and luck. The more thoroughly you prepare, the luckier you become. The more completely you train, the more fortune seems to favor you. The more ready you are for anything, the more everything seems to work in your favor. This is not because luck actually favors the prepared. This is because preparation eliminates the need for luck. When you have trained for every possible situation, you are ready regardless of which situation arises. When you have developed skill for every likely challenge, You can handle whatever challenge presents itself. When you have prepared for both success and failure, you cannot be defeated by either. I trained not just for the opponents I expected to face, but for opponents I hoped never to face. I practiced not just the techniques I preferred to use, but the techniques I prayed I would never need. I prepared not just for victory, but for the moment when victory seemed impossible. This is why I appeared lucky to those who watched my duels. This is why fortune seemed to favor me in difficult situations. This is why I succeeded where others failed, not because I had better luck, but because I had better preparation. Not because chance favored me, but because I had eliminated the role of chance. Not because fortune smiled on me, but because I had made fortune irrelevant. But let me ask you this. What are you hoping will never happen that you should be preparing for anyway? What challenges are you assuming you will not face, that you should be training for regardless? What skills are you avoiding because you believe you will never need them? Most people prepare for what they want to happen and ignore what they fear might happen. They train for success and hope failure will not find them. They develop strengths and assume their weaknesses will not be tested. This is backwards. This is why they seem unlucky when difficulties arise. This is why they appear to have bad fortune when challenges exceed their preparation. The warrior prepares for what he hopes will not happen more thoroughly than he prepares for what he hopes will happen. The warrior trains his weaknesses harder than he trains his strengths. The warrior develops skills for situations he prays he will never face. This is how you eliminate luck from the equation. This is how you make fortune irrelevant. This is how you ensure that your success depends on your preparation rather than on circumstances beyond your control. I practiced sword techniques in rain, snow, darkness, and blinding sun. I trained when I was tired, hungry, sick, and injured. I fought imaginary opponents who were faster, stronger, more skilled, and more experienced than any real opponent I had ever faced. This was not paranoia. This was not pessimism. This was not fear. This was intelligent preparation for an uncertain world. When the actual moments of testing came, they seemed easy compared to the conditions I had trained for. Real opponents seemed slow compared to the imaginary opponents I had practiced against. Actual challenges seemed manageable compared to the impossible scenarios I had prepared for. Start preparing beyond what you think you will need. Train for conditions worse than you expect to face. Develop skills for challenges you hope will never arise. If you are in business, prepare for economic conditions twice as difficult as anything you have experienced. If you are in relationships, develop communication skills for conflicts twice as intense as any you have faced. If you are pursuing goals, build capabilities for obstacles twice as challenging as any you anticipate. This is not negative thinking. This is strategic thinking. This is not expecting the worst. This is preparing for the worst, so you can handle anything less than the worst with ease. The man who prepares only for what he expects will be defeated by what he does not expect. The man who trains only for ideal conditions will fail when conditions become challenging. The man who relies on everything going according to plan will be destroyed when plans inevitably change. But the man who prepares for everything cannot be surprised by anything. The man who trains for the worst conditions cannot be defeated by normal conditions. The man who expects plans to fail and prepares accordingly cannot be stopped when they do fail. This is how you become truly fortunate. Not by hoping for good luck, but by making luck unnecessary. Not by relying on favorable circumstances, but by becoming stronger than unfavorable circumstances. Not by depending on everything going right, but by being ready for everything going wrong. Luck is for those who did not prepare. Fortune favors those who made fortune irrelevant. Chance rewards those who eliminated the power of chance. Prepare completely. Train thoroughly. Ready yourself for anything. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path to reliable success. This is how you win consistently, not by getting lucky, but by making luck irrelevant through superior preparation. I accepted death early, and because I did, I was never afraid to act. You cannot fight while clinging to life. Most people live their entire lives as prisoners of their fear of death. They make safe choices because they are afraid of dangerous ones. They avoid risks because they might lead to loss. They cling to what they have because they are terrified of losing it. This fear makes them weak. This clinging makes them slow. This attachment to safety makes them vulnerable to anyone who is willing to risk everything. But I learned early in my training that the man who accepts death becomes impossible to defeat. Not because he wants to die, but because he is no longer controlled by the fear of dying. This acceptance freed me. It freed me to act without hesitation. It freed me to take necessary risks. It freed me to fight with complete commitment instead of holding something back in case I needed to retreat. Do you make decisions based on what you want to achieve? Or do you make decisions based on what you're afraid to lose? Do you act from strength and purpose? Or do you act from fear and the need for security? Do you pursue what calls to you? Or do you avoid what threatens you? Here is what I discovered about the fear of death. It is not really the fear of dying that controls people. It is the fear of losing what they think makes life worth living. Their possessions, their status, their comfort, their plans, their image of themselves. But the man who can lose everything and still be himself cannot be threatened by the loss of anything. The man who can face death and remain calm cannot be intimidated by anything less than death. The man who needs nothing to complete him cannot be controlled by the promise or threat of anything. This is the paradox of accepting death. When you accept that you might lose everything, you become free to risk everything. When you accept that you might fail completely, you become free to attempt anything. When you accept that you might die, you become free to truly live. I fought every duel as if it might be my last. Not because I wanted it to be my last, but because this perspective freed me to fight with total commitment. I made every decision as if I had nothing to lose because ultimately I understood that everything could be lost at any moment, regardless of how carefully I tried to protect it. But let me ask you this. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you attempt if you were not afraid of loss? How would you live if you truly accepted that life is temporary and everything in it is borrowed? Most people spend so much energy trying to avoid death that they never learn how to live. They are so afraid of losing their life that they never use their life. They are so concerned with surviving that they never discover what they are surviving for. This is not living. This is hiding. This is not courage. This is the most sophisticated form of cowardice. The acceptance of death I am speaking of is not morbid. It is not pessimistic. It is not a death wish. It is the recognition of truth. Everything that lives will die. Everything that begins will end. Everything that is gained can be lost. This is not a tragedy. This is simply the nature of existence. And when you accept this nature instead of fighting it, you discover incredible freedom. The freedom to love completely without the guarantee that love will last forever. The freedom to create boldly without the promise that your creations will endure. The freedom to act courageously without the assurance that courage will be rewarded. Remember the moment I fully accepted my own mortality. I was young, facing my first serious duel against an opponent more experienced than myself. I realized I might die. And in that moment of acceptance, fear left me completely. Not because I wanted to die, but because I was willing to die, if that was the cost of living according to my principles. Not because I did not value my life, but because I valued what? My life stood for more than the mere continuation of my existence. This acceptance changed everything. My movements became more fluid because they were not constrained by excessive caution. My decisions became clearer because they were not clouded by the fear of consequences. My actions became more powerful because they came from complete commitment rather than partial engagement. Start practicing this acceptance today. Not the seeking of death, but the acceptance of mortality. Not the devaluing of life, but the recognition that life's value comes from how it is lived, not from how long it lasts. Ask yourself what you would do if you had nothing to lose. What would you attempt if failure could not diminish you? How would you live if you truly understood that the only real failure is the failure to use the life you have been given? When you accept death, you discover life. When you accept loss, you discover what cannot be lost. When you accept ending, you discover what is eternal within you. This is the ultimate freedom. This is the final courage. This is how you become truly alive, by accepting that life is temporary and using that acceptance to live without the fear that keeps most people from ever truly living at all. Do not wait for threat to prepare. Walk each day as if you are already in the duel. Most people live as if they are spectators in their own lives. They sleepwalk through their days, assuming that when real challenges arise, they will somehow transform into the person capable of meeting those challenges. This is delusion. This is how the weak comfort themselves. This is why they are defeated before battles even begin. The person you are in ordinary moments is the person you will be in extraordinary moments. The habits you practice in safety are the habits you will rely on in danger. The character you develop in peace is the character you will reveal in war. There is no magical transformation that occurs when stakes increase. There is no sudden acquisition of skills you have not practiced. There is no mysterious appearance of strength you have not built. You fight as you train. You perform as you practice. You respond as you have prepared. Do you live with alertness or with distraction? Do you move with purpose or with aimlessness? Do you speak with intention or with carelessness? Do you think with clarity or with confusion? These are not small questions about minor preferences. These are crucial questions about who you are becoming and who you will be when it matters most. I lived every day as if I might be challenged to a duel before the sun set, not because I expected to be challenged, but because this mindset kept me sharp, alert, and ready for anything that might arise. When I walked through a town, I walked with awareness of every person around me. When I spoke with strangers, I spoke with attention to their intentions and capabilities. When I made decisions, I made them with consideration of how they might affect my readiness for whatever came next. This was not paranoia. This was not fear. This was the discipline of constant preparation. This was the practice of living at peak readiness instead of hoping I could reach peak readiness when peak readiness became necessary. Here is what I learned about readiness. You cannot turn it on and off like a lamp. You cannot summon it when you need it if you have not been building it when you do not need it. You cannot access in moments of crisis what you have not developed in moments of calm. Readiness is not a state you achieve. Readiness is a way you live. It is not something you do occasionally. It is something you are constantly. It is not a preparation for life. It is a way of living life. But let me ask you this. How would you walk if you knew you might need to run at any moment? How would you speak if you knew your words might need to become commands? How would you think if you knew you might need to make life and death decisions before the day ends? This is not about living in fear. This is about living with intensity. This is not about expecting disaster. This is about maintaining the kind of presence and awareness that makes you ready for anything, disaster or opportunity, challenge or blessing, conflict or cooperation. The sword that remains always sheathed grows dull from lack of use. The mind that remains always at rest grows slow from lack of challenge. The spirit that remains always comfortable grows weak from lack of testing, but the sword that is drawn each day in practice remains sharp for real battles. The mind that is challenged each day with difficult thinking remains quick for real decisions. The spirit that is tested each day with small disciplines remains strong for great trials. I practiced this discipline in everything I did. When I ate with the awareness that this meal might need to sustain me through unexpected challenges. When I slept with the readiness to wake immediately if circumstances demanded it. When I rested I rested in a way that restored my energy without dimming my alertness. This way of living made every day a form of training. It made every moment an opportunity to strengthen the qualities I would need in crucial moments. It made ordinary life a preparation for extraordinary demands. Start living this way today, not with anxiety about what might happen, but with readiness for whatever does happen. Not with worry about future challenges, but with the quiet confidence that comes from constant preparation. Pay attention to how you walk, how you sit, how you speak, how you listen. Practice moving with purpose even when purpose is not urgently required. Practice thinking clearly even when clear thinking is not immediately necessary. Practice acting decisively even when decisions are not immediately consequential. These small practices in low-stakes moments build the habits that will serve you in high-stakes moments. These minor disciplines in ordinary circumstances create the character that will sustain you in extraordinary circumstances. Live as if the sword is drawn, not because you are looking for fights, but because you are ready for whatever life brings. Walk as if you are already in the duel, not because you fear conflict, but because you have developed the presence and awareness that make you effective in any situation. This is the way of the warrior. This is the discipline of constant readiness. This is how you become the kind of person who rises to meet challenges instead of being overwhelmed by them. Not by hoping you will be ready when the time comes, but by being ready all the time. I did not seek glory. I sought the way. When you live with honor, even in silence, you need nothing more. The weakest warriors are those who fight for applause. They need others to witness their victories. They require recognition to feel successful. They depend on external validation to know their worth. This dependence makes them weak. It makes them fight for the wrong reasons. It makes them vulnerable to anyone who understands that their true battle is not with their opponents, but with their need for approval. I learned early that the most important battles are fought in silence. The most significant victories are won in solitude. The truest tests of character happen when no one is watching and no one will ever know. Do you act differently when others are watching than when you are alone? Do you work harder when your efforts will be recognized than when they will go unnoticed? Do you make better choices when people will praise you than when no one will know what you have done? If your answer is yes, then you are not yet walking the true way. You are still enslaved to the opinions of others. You are still fighting battles for the wrong reasons. Here is what I discovered about the relationship between honor and recognition. True honor does not need witnesses. Real strength does not require acknowledgement. Genuine mastery does not depend on applause. The man who needs others to see his victories is not truly victorious. The man who requires recognition for his good deeds is not truly good. The man who depends on praise for his achievements is not truly achieving. But the man who can act with honor when no one is watching, who can work with excellence when no one will know, who can live with integrity when no one will praise him, this man has found real power. This man has discovered true freedom. I remember many moments when I could have taken credit I had not earned, could have accepted praise for achievements that were not entirely mine, could have built my reputation on foundations that were not solid. Each time I chose differently, not because I did not value recognition, but because I valued something more, the knowledge that my character was real, not performed, that my abilities were genuine, not inflated, that my honor was earned, not granted by others who did not. Know the full truth, but let me ask you this. What would you do if no one would ever know you did it? How would you work if no one would ever praise your efforts? What kind of person would you be if there were no audience to impress and no critics? To prove wrong, this is who you really are. This is your true character. This is the measure of your actual worth. Not what you do when others are watching, but what you do when you are alone with your choices. The samurai code I followed was not a performance for others. It was a commitment to myself. It was not about appearing honorable to the world. It was about being honorable in reality. It was not about building a reputation. It was about building a character that could withstand any test. Most people are performing their lives instead of living them. They are acting the role of who they think they should be instead of becoming who they actually are. They are more concerned with their image than with their substance. This is exhausting. This is unsustainable. This is why they become weak under pressure, because their strength was never real to begin with. It was only a performance, and performances cannot be maintained indefinitely. But the warrior who lives authentically, who acts from genuine character rather than from the desire to impress, who follows his principles regardless of whether anyone notices, this warrior has unlimited strength because his strength comes from within rather than from without. I practiced my sword forms alone in the mountains with the same intensity I brought to public duels. I maintained my discipline in private with the same rigor I showed in public. I lived by my code in secret with the same commitment I demonstrated openly. This consistency between public and private behavior created unshakable strength. I never had to remember how I was supposed to act because I always acted from who I truly was. I never had to maintain a false image because my image was simply the natural expression of my character. Start living this way today. Act the same way in private that you act in public. Work with the same excellence when no one will know as when everyone will see. Make choices based on what is right rather than on what will be recognized. This is not about becoming a hermit. This is not about rejecting all recognition. This is about building a foundation of character that does not depend on external validation for its strength. When your honor is real rather than performed, it cannot be taken from you by criticism or changed by lack of recognition. When your strength comes from within rather than from applause, it cannot be weakened by silence or absence of praise. The true samurai needs no audience because he is not performing. He is simply being who he is, and who he is does not change based on who is watching. This is the ultimate freedom. This is the final test. This is how you know you have found the way, when you can walk it in complete silence and still feel completely fulfilled. You already have what it takes. Now go prove it, not to others but to yourself, not for glory, but for the sake of the way itself. This is the path I have shown you. This is the code I have shared. This is how you become truly invincible, not by defeating all enemies, but by becoming someone who needs no enemies to defeat in order to know his own worth.